Redditors who have been in coma for a long time, more than 1 year, what was it like to wake up again? And how did you adjust to literally a long fast forward? I was out for 40 days after a motorcycle accident, but I don't remember much for about 6 weeks after that as well. I was sedated with ketamine and a mix of opiates, and started to wean off of them while still on a ventilator and ECMO. I was extremely confused and seeing double, so I was terrified. Communicating was very hard because of the confusion, and that I couldn't talk or write. The thing I remember most vividly is the insane hallucinations I had as a result of the ketamine. I was hallucinating something that was making me freak out and try to rip the tubes out of me, including my ventilator, chest tubes, and arterial line, so they had no choice but to tie my limbs down and put boxing gloves on my hands. I had no idea I was doing any of that, but I had moments where I was significantly more aware of what was going on, which was so frustrating because I was completely tied down and again, couldn't communicate. The doctors and nurses kept trying to explain to me what I was doing and that I needed to stop, but I did not understand. I felt like I was being tortured and I couldn't understand why. At the time of my accident, I was in an online relationship that had become very rocky. I had booked a flight to meet the girl and my accident happened the day before my flight. This was only somewhat of a coincidence as I was riding my motorcycle extremely recklessly due to my emotions and frustration in the relationship, and with my life for other reasons. My family knew about my relationship and was able to tell her, but it wasn't until about 3 months after the day of the accident that I talked to her for the first time by sending her a video. One of my respiratory therapists put a device on my tracheostomy, so I was able to talk. This was an extremely emotional moment and my mom was the first person to hear my voice. I used the device to talk on the phone with the girl, but it was difficult because the ventilator was loud and the device did not sound like my normal voice. My relationship with her was not the same and not recoverable. In hindsight, this was for the better, but in the moment, despite all the terrible things I was experiencing, the feeling of having lost the connection with this girl, who was my first love, was awful. By this time I was becoming completely aware of what I did and what happened, and extremely conscious of what I had put my mom through, as she had been by my side every day in the hospital, not knowing if I would survive or if I had sustained significant brain damage. After 5 months in the hospital, I was transferred to a rehabilitation facility, and 2 weeks later, December 2019, discharged home with a wheelchair and walker. I was gaining the ability to walk short distances on my own and even decided to start college again. Then COVID hit, and I also experienced some unfortunate medical complications that kept me in and out of the hospital for most of 2020. This is all very recent, but every aspect of my life has changed post-accident. My finances are in ruin, my physical health and pain is terrible, but given the fact that I have all my limbs and can still walk, I feel like I can't complain. I value time completely differently because of my continuing medical complications. I don't think I will live very long. It's a lot harder for me to get angry or upset about anything because it all feels insignificant compared to being tied down, unable to communicate, and in pain. I could write a book filled with details of the past and how I'm doing now, so I'll cut it off here. Not me, but my grandfather woke up from a coma a few months ago. He was in a coma for 13 months. He had a brain tumor, and he had to do a surgery to remove it. The surgery was a success, but apparently one of the surgeons damaged his brain accidentally, and because of that he was in a coma for 13 months. When he woke up he could barely speak, and he had to make a recovery at the hospital. After 2 or 3 months of recovery he looked a lot better, but unfortunately for our family he was a completely different person when he started to speak more clearly, which was very sad. But when his memories came back he was acting like before the coma, which made everyone in our family very happy again. I asked him a few weeks how was the experience. He said it was confusing and strange, but at the end it was all good because everything is back to normal. In basic training, I caught meningitis and was in and out of a coma for about a week. I remember my military leadership visiting me, calling my wife to tell her, and being ambulanced to another hospital. But that's it. When I was awake, I was fully paralyzed from the neck down. My wife came to visit me and she told me I smelled like urine because they didn't give me a catheter, nor did anyone help me to the bathroom. So, I just laid in bed and pissed myself over and over. I remember being so thirsty. When I fully woke up a few days later, I had very little feeling in my legs and was very wobbly. When I walked, I couldn't fully outstretch my arms without severe pain in my hands. When I was released, I asked about why no one helped me, and they told me they don't help any patients because they have too many people faking symptoms to get out of training. They sent me back to basic training where I slept for 3 days straight, only being woken to eat. When I woke up, after those 3 days, they gave me all my gear and sent me on a 4-mile forced march, during which I tripped 74 times. I counted and still remember, and fell down 6 times. Because I didn't quit on that march, they kept me in training, and I graduated with the same class I started, which is unheard of and completely insane. I couldn't even finish the final fitness test, so they just pencil whipped the record, all because I didn't quit. It took me months to regain full feeling in my extremities. I was only in a coma for 7 days due to COVID kicking my A. On day 6, I was fighting the sedatives and pulled, I think, my feeding tube out, so they tried to bring me out of the coma then. My oxygen was too low, so they stuck me back under and successfully brought me out of the coma on day 7. 2/3 of patients like me on a ventilator experience what's called IQ delirium. I was tripping balls for 3 days. After waking up, the nurses were trying to kill me. I had killed someone outside a nightclub, which is why the nurses and doctors were happy to kill me. The whiteboard on the wall was a computer. It wasn't, and the doctor spent his day writing messages on it to taunt me with. I had HIV. They ran out of blood for my transfusions. Delirious colors dumb. Like the 4th bag was clear. It was probably paracetamol or antibiotics. A bunch of my friends walked past my room to test if I could recognize them. I tried to escape on day 2. This shows how weak I was. It took me like 10 minutes to swing one leg over the railing of the bed. A nurse called Rachel saw and stopped me, although I think I would have passed out before getting the rest of my body over it. I felt pretty guilty about this the next day when I broke out of the delirium as me and her got on really well. On the 2nd day awake, my mum and twin were allowed visit me as they figured it would help me mentally. I just thought they were there to say goodbye. I kept talking my brother through where to find my will. I also told him that the nurses were trying to kill me and asked him for our secret word, which I got wrong, so I figured he was in on it or just didn't care. They were allowed visit me as they had recovered from COVID. I'm not sure if they realized it yet, but this was the beginning of an episode of acute pancreatitis, so I was throwing up any food they tried to give me and asked my mum to try feeding me. She was so proud that I was eating the jelly and ice cream from her. Then I vomited it all over myself and her. By day 3 I was aware that they weren't trying to kill me and had in fact saved my life. I think I knew it was COVID, but I thought I had been rude to them and racially abused a ton of nurses, which apparently didn't happen. The physios came that day and helped me sit up and put my feet on the ground. I thought, screw this, I can walk, and fell onto the physio. She caught me and the other physio had to run over and get me into bed again. The physios helped me sit up in a chair beside the bed and asked me to remain sitting up for 45 minutes. I remember this being a terrifying torture. I called and chatted to my parents for 15 minutes, after which I couldn't hold my arm up anymore. I was so proud to have lasted the full 45. I wasn't able to keep tablets down, and my veins were dodgy and kept not working for the cannula. So my team got radiology to use their imaging equipment to place a large semi-permanent cannula into my brachial artery, right on your bicep, and threaded that to just outside one of the chambers of my heart. It's called a PICC line. I mention it because one of the IQ nurses came with me for this. I was piss terrified. It's a very simple procedure, but everything was scary at that point for me. She held my hand during the procedure and was an incredible support. For anyone curious, at this point I now had one cannula in my left hand, one in my right, a PICC on my right arm, and my main line in my groin. I then got discharged down to the regular ward that evening. On the ward I was so much more aware of what wasn't working. I had a catheter in dealing with the pee, but pooping was a challenge. I had to use a bedpan the first few days. I was so happy when I was strong enough to walk the 2 meters to the bathroom and poop myself. I had to carry the catheter bag on the Zimmer frame and try not to jiggle it, which was rather painful. A day later the catheter came out, which wasn't terrible, and I could pee on my own, but I had very little sensation. So I had a pee bottle by the bed. I'd get like 20 seconds warning from my body. I had much more warning for poops, but I was still vomiting and not eating enough to make a poop. It was around this time that the emotions started coming back. Either I was just too sick for them in IQ, or it was a way of dealing with how scary IQ is. But I was very passive the days I was awake there. Like, oh, they are trying to kill me. Well, okay then. Isn't that a shame? So now I remember crying a bit and then recall laughing for the first time since waking up. I was another 3 weeks building my strength up and getting over the pancreatitis before I was discharged home. The rate of recovery was unreal. Nearly every day I had some small improvement, like, oh, today I walked all the way to the bathroom without the frame, or today I put on my slippers, so mentally I was doing really well. This all happened in January this year and I've pretty much made a full recovery now. I'm back at my old physical fitness. No breathing issues or any lung damage. I have 3 clots and I'm on blood thinners, but they are not affecting me, and my heart rate is normal again, resting at 60 right now. At my worst, lying in bed one evening in the hospital, it was 153. The staff in the hospital were incredible. I'm so fortunate to have survived this.